All right, YouTube, you may have seen Turkey, unfortunately, now is a totalitarian state, no longer a representative democracy. Erdogan has, in essence, become a dictator at this point. He now has virtually unlimited power. I have no doubt that he's going to cast forth opposition parties, probably do away with what's currently the Turkish legislative system in favor of something that's simply a one-party state. Unfortunately, the leaders of many Western nations will give them a pass on this. They'll ignore it completely because they want them to keep supplying like limited numbers of Syrians to put the screws to whoever doesn't like Merkel at the time. And that's really what it's about at this point. It's not even really so much slave labor anymore as they just want more political pawns in Germany and elsewhere. They want to stack the deck against Eastern Europe especially. But Turkey's now a totalitarian state. Let's look at the evidence for this. They have an attempted coup. Erdogan suddenly just starts fucking killing and ousting everybody in his path. And it was suspicious anyway at the time to begin with. Anytime there's a problem in Turkey, they immediately shut down all social media. The media there is essentially at this point state-run or at least state co-opted. Their representative system has just fundamentally been overthrown. Constitutional change that gives Erdogan more general power to dismiss ministers and so forth, which means that if he doesn't like you, if you've been elected into a different position or appointed, he can just get rid of you at a moment's notice. He doesn't have to consult the legislative body in Turkey. That's a totalitarian state. That's not a representative democracy in any way, shape, or form, and it was already having problems, let's face it, years ago. This started, remember the protests they had over, I can't remember the name of the park there. Erdogan wanted to get rid of that to build like his palace or some shit or shopping center or whatever it was. People were protesting. And then the Turkish government came in, brutalized a bunch of people. They had that attempt to have like a gay march in Turkey. And they were attacking that too, and that didn't really spark outrage in Turkey because it's not exactly the most LGBT-friendly nation in the world, but certainly the Western Europeans looked askance at that for at least a little while. Meanwhile, everyone wants to be Erdogan's best friend. Like, you listen to Merkel talk, and Turkey's better than Germany in every way, and man, we need all those Syrian refugees, all like, what is it, like 10 million of them or something, to pay for all the lives that we took during the Holocaust, to take our guilt off our backs and stimulate our population. And Merkel's talking about all this crap that goes on in her country as though it's not her own fault. So Turkey has been overthrown and should be kicked out of NATO. That's my new summation. I said last year they were an intrinsic ally within NATO. We should do as much as possible to prevent exactly what's happening now from happening, in hopes of retaining them in the West. They control the Bosphorus. They do have a fairly powerful military. Along with Egypt, they are the other main focal point of this region. If you have Turkey and Egypt on your side, you control an enormous proportion of the world's trade, especially in energy. However, the West let him slip. We put very little pressure on Erdogan. Obama least of all. Obama used no pressure at all. Obama completely ignored the issue. As Turkey slowly slid away from Ataturk's reforms, from being a secular, liberalized, classically liberal, not liberal in the neoliberal sense, nation, slid backwards and backwards and now is back in the dark ages as far as its government goes, with Erdogan at the helm as a de facto dictator. Obama did nothing. Obama was too busy dicking around killing civilian citizens and ousting Gaddafi to make Libya 10,000 times worse than it ever was when Gaddafi was in power. He was too busy doing that and couldn't focus on Turkey. And Erdogan looked to Russia and said, maybe we need some joint agreement with them. We're going to work with them a little bit too. And Obama didn't do anything. And then they said, yeah, fuck the West. Yeah, we're in NATO, but we're partnering directly now with Russia after blowing one of their planes out of the air for no reason. And Obama did nothing. Where was he this whole time? Where was he this whole time when the entire population of Turkey that generally, unless you're in the outlands in Kurdite regions where it's all theocracy, if you were in the western half of Turkey, you were essentially in a liberal democracy until a few years ago. Now, there's no free press there, that's for sure. Certainly no fucking free speech or expression. You can't speak about you insult Erdogan, you probably get beheaded at this point. He's like a sultan. He's more like a sultan than he is a president or a prime minister or any standard sense that we'd have it in the Western world. We sat by and did very, very little. And I saw it coming years ago. I warned an individual who was living in Turkey, probably still is, that this would happen. Erdogan would become a dictator. Turkey would increasingly be at hazard from rebel groups, especially the Kurds. Turkey would probably end up loosely aligning with the East as well as the West, trying to straddle the fence. And it's all happening. And Turkey is going to get worse, let me tell you. It's not going to get better. We have to draw them in all at once. We have to hope Erdogan gets shot or dies of a stroke and that the AKP somehow falls into ruin. We have to hope something like that happens at this point unless we intend to activate like the CIA to get rid of them ourselves. We would have to undergo regime change in Turkey of all places, a NATO ally, which probably isn't even possible, let's face it. Thanks, Obama. Yeah. Just like you tried to fuck with Egypt. You drove them further towards the Eastern sphere, too, by trying to overthrow their government by saying, oh, how great the Muslim Brotherhood was. The one that drastically lost almost all of its popularity when they attempted to institute Sharia law light. Yeah, that was a wonderful move, Obama. That Arab Spring sure was just a great thing. Now Erdogan, what's he going to do? He's probably going to attempt to invade Syria. He'll partner with the Russians a little bit, and I'll tell you what he's aiming for. He wants the Russians to go and slaughter a bunch of Kurds in northern Iraq and in northern Syria. Erdogan, meanwhile, will, keep a lid on the situation permanently in exchange for some of that land. And Assad will be more than willing to give it to him, because one of his major enemies will be wiped off the face of the earth by a joint Turkish and Russian action. And when this actually works, when it actually happens, the Bosphorus will essentially be controlled by the Russians. Well, they don't have to worry about warm water portage anymore. They don't have to worry about the Western world throttling their naval capabilities anymore. They sure as hell don't have to worry about being surrounded by missile systems anymore, because they'll have a hold of Turkey as their pawn. In exchange, of course, for Erdogan being number one, supreme dictator of his nation. Doesn't have to worry about being reelected anymore. And number two, Turkey can begin taking back little parcels of land to rebuild what used to be the Ottoman Empire. In fact, I think Erdogan wants to go further. I think he wants the whole region to himself. I think he'll even softball the Israelis. He'll probably try to get them involved. Oh yeah, you should go ahead and attack the Syrians. I don't fucking care. Meanwhile, he's moving his tanks into position to blitzkrieg their border to take as much as possible when the Israelis do. I wouldn't put it past him. He's a devious fellow. He's a dictator, an oligarch, sort of individual. Yeah, so Turkey has already fallen. It's already a dictatorship. What democracy? What representative system of government? They're not even an oligarchy anymore. Erdogan does whatever he wants. Largely because people at first thought he had common sense, so they were comfy giving him more power. What a bad idea that was. AKP, oh, we're the standard bearers of something that's roughly halfway between sort of the traditionalist Islamic parties and the secular liberal parties. We don't want to be Europe's bitch or the bitch of Saudi Arabia. We want to be Ottomans again. Yeah, look how that turned out for you. You're not going to get the Ottoman Empire back, but you may get nuked. You may get kicked out of NATO and be utterly at the mercy of the Eastern world. Erdogan, long ago I said, or Turkey rather as a whole, would have to choose between being a European-style power or the power of the Middle East, and they've chosen the latter. The problem with that is the road ahead might lead to World War III, or at the very least it might lead to war with Israel, which would result in the wiping out of the Turkish people, by the way, regardless of what the US or anyone else does. Probably see Israel wiped out also at the same time. So you'd have a lot of dead people in the Middle East. Yet again, it happens every few years anyway, I know. You get kind of numb to it, but it'd be on a larger scale, I suppose. It means that even though he'll be the main power of that region, he'll still be a vassal of the Russians. You know, a bulwark, a shield against the Europeans. At the same time, he's going to get his diplomatic shit kicked in by all the populists rising up in Europe. And this is why the one thing that the populists and nativists in Europe, I think, didn't foresee is that as they rose up more and more, it would alienate Turkey, which isn't yet in the EU. which now thinks that it can no longer have a place as part of any European framework because Europe will break down altogether, and so they want to safeguard their own sort of relations with other nations that arguably long-term will actually be more stable, assuming what happens in Europe actually happens. And he's kind of right, but that doesn't make him less of a tin horn. Erdogan's just a tin horn. Just a garden variety psychopath, honestly, who unfortunately happens to control a fairly large, sophisticated military. So Turkey's already fallen. It's a totalitarian state. That's all it is. Short of a revolution or regime change or assassination of Erdogan or something like that, they will remain that way, presumably for a very long time. That's about all. Peace out.